Well, good afternoon, fellow PMI team members and guests. Hey, this is Brian Russell, and I want to welcome you to our April edition of our Lunch and Learn event. Just a couple housekeeping items as a reminder. On the right-hand side of your Hopin screen, you will find a menu, and you'll find an event and a session menu. Given that for Q&A, we only have written Q&A available. Please use the Q&A in the session portion of the right-hand menu for any questions you might have for Greg. Greg will be running a few polls and likely be asking for feedback during the presentation, so use that to respond. As usual, we will have, after the meeting, we'll send out instructions on how to claim your PDU, your credit for attending the Lunch and Learn, so be watching your email for that. And with that, let me just quickly introduce Greg. You can see he's going to be presenting on I Was Agile before the Manifesto. So Greg has spent a career in IT as a software engineer, a project manager, and a Scrum Master, and has taught project management courses at the College of Idaho. He currently works at PetIQ as the manager of IT implementation services. So let's all welcome Greg, and let's hear about I Was Agile before the Manifesto. Greg, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. It's good to be here. It's good to see a lot of names here of people who I haven't seen in quite a while. It's nice to have you along today. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, I like Brian said in the introduction, when the Manifesto for Agile Software Development was published, I looked at it and said, yeah, this makes perfect sense. And in fact, things that have gone well for me is when I followed these principles, and when things have not gone so well, it's when I didn't follow these principles. I just didn't have anything I didn't have a framework to put that around. And so I think that's been really helpful to me. And I just kind of wanted to talk about what's happened in the last 20 years and how we, what does Agile mean today, and how can we be Agile with or without a manifesto? To the right place so I can get, there we go. So we're going to talk first about Agile everywhere. We'll go ahead and we'll talk specifically about the Agile Manifesto, and then we'll look at the values and principles, and finally how to be Agile without being big A Agile. I think everyone has seen some kind of Agile, and let's go ahead and put up that first poll, George.
Okay.
Where are we? Where do you find yourself in the Agile journey?
Okay.
That's what it's going to say, and there's going to be some fascinating answers that you can choose from. They are absolutely creative.
I love it, Greg. Hey, yeah, so for the attendees, look under the session and then polls under the session, and then make your pick on where are you on your Agile journey. And then once you hit submit, you'll be able to see the results on the how the audience has voted.
Yeah, and I like that we're trending toward. I try to work with an Agile mindset most of the time. I think that's where I'm gonna be encouraging us to move more and more in that direction throughout this presentation. But a lot of people, I think, have worked in some kind of Agile framework, you know, and just to think of a few of them, you know, there are all kinds of ways that people have tried to be agile. Certainly the Scrum, the Kanban, and then some of the larger components like SAFe and DAD and LESS and lots of different certifications. All of these have something good. They all have really good ideas in them. Some of them have more good ideas than others. Some certifications are better than others. Some training is better than others. But really, this is, I think it was Dave Thomas, who was one of the original signers of the Agile Manifesto. He labeled this the Agile Industrial Complex. And sometimes that's what we end up in. We end up in something where the framework gets pushed harder than the actual agile mindset. I know this is something I saw. In fact, one of the early teams that I saw practicing Scrum when I was doing project management, there was a team that wanted to use Scrum, and they did, and they followed all the practices. If you look at the Scrum guide, they were doing all the ceremonies. But they weren't acting in agile ways. They had a backlog, they had tools that they were using, but they weren't actually ending up delivering software more quickly and getting that where you can inspect what you have, adapt what you're doing, adapt the product, and it turned me off of the agile. Of that, I thought, oh, there's really nothing useful in Scrum. It's just another way of putting structure without adding value. I then got around Scrum teams that actually worked, and I learned how to be a Scrum Master and helped teams move out of that. But it is so easy to get into the agile industrial complex and just do the things that, whether it's the Scrum guide or whether it's the SAFe model or whatever, just doing the things, but without understanding the why behind it. So that's what I want to talk about here. Because this was written, it was written in February of 2001, so well over 20 years ago. And it was written at a software development conference by software engineers. And so therefore it was titled at that point the Manifesto for Agile Software Development. We have found now that there are lots of ways to practice this, regardless of whether you're developing software or whether you're using this to build processes, to build actual physical products, to host conferences and events. There are the ideas behind it are the same. So even though a lot of these words are going to refer to software, it's really about that end product. So when they say we are uncovering better ways of developing software, or of, I would say, building solutions, they found better ways by doing it and helping others do it. And I think that makes a lot of sense when you're in, and I was a software engineer when this came out. I was working at Micron at the time. And so the ideas resonated with me a lot because I could see where we as engineers were working well as a team. I could see where we weren't. I could see some of the roadblocks and some of the things that were hampering us from doing better software development. But it can be used in a lot of really good ways. I put the link up here to the Agile Manifesto. It has not been updated since 2001. The manifesto has stayed the same. Even the word manifesto, which people have complained about, has stayed the same. But I think that the basic ideas, I think the only thing I would actually quibble with is this: it's not all just about developing software. It's about building solutions that may or may not involve software. But as we get into the values, this is really the core. This is the front page of that document. And again, it's not that they point out there's value to the items on the right, but what's on the left is more important. And I think that this is a really good place to start. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Part of what I was complaining about a little earlier, and I saw when this came out, I was working at Micron. We were doing a lot of work with rational unified process. Some of you who were involved in software development may have come across that same system 20 years ago, where there were tools to write up all your requirements and to tie it to test cases and to tie that to code, and it was the concept was pretty good, but the actual implementation became really heavy on the process, and it was really easy to get away from talking to people. So you might have a business analyst, a requirements analyst, who would go and write down the requirements in, what was it called, Requisite Pro, and then somebody else would use a rational robot to build test cases against that, but they didn't have to talk to each other. They could just link things in the tool set, and it was really easy for why are we doing this? What value does it add to the business? Who are the people who are using this, and what do they really need? It was really easy for that to get lost, even though the intention was to make that much more visible and transparent, but the focus on the processes and tools started to hide that. Had we focused on individuals and interactions more, and then use the tool set to support that, rather than the other way around, using a tool set to try to drive interactions, we would have been better off and had more success. So individuals and interactions, and I always think, say, you hire smart people, and they will figure out the best processes, and then you can get tools that help drive those processes and support those processes. But that individuals and people talking to each other, we talk how important communication is as project managers. When we're working with project teams, when we're working with stakeholders, we talk about, we actually a lot of times write out a communication plan. This is how we're going to communicate. And that's good because we're focusing on, as long as we continue to focus on individuals and interactions and not make a communication plan drive what we do, but we're actually using this to help everyone talk to each other, then we're in really good shape. The second one, working software over comprehensive documentation. Documentation is great, and you need documentation. And there are certain places where you need it. You need more and heavier documentation than in other parts of what you're building. So as you're building this solution, whatever it is, some things do need comprehensive documentation, but not everything does. I remember when I worked at SuperValue, there was I was told, so this is at least a second-hand, if not a third or fourth or fifth-hand story. There was a new project manager who came in, and we had a methodology called Cadence, and it had a lot of documents. It had the requirements document, it had business process design documents. But the first thing we said was, you should tailor the Cadence process to your project, which is a core project management process. It's a core PMI process. You tailor the needs of the enterprise, but you tailor them around the actual project that you're doing. And there was a project manager who came in and said, well, I just want to understand all of these documents, so I think I'm going to do all of them for this fairly simple project. And luckily the project director said, no, you're not going to do that. We're going to focus on getting things done, not on just writing documentation for the sake of it. And that's exactly the right response. I had another, we had a process at Albertsons when I worked there as a project manager before SuperValue, where where we had a really heavy project methodology. I was working on a project where we were testing blade servers in the data center, and so we were setting up databases. We were setting up Oracle databases with failover, and we were setting up VMware, and it had a few use cases. But it was, can we use blade servers to host the hardware and the software that we need for just for basic infrastructure for VMware and for databases. And one of the documents that we had to make was a wireframe of the user interface. And there was no user interface, but I actually had to go to the director of usability or whatever, I don't remember what his title was, but I actually had to go and say, Dan, I got a project, there's no user interface, I'm not going to do wireframes. And he actually had to sign off and say, this project, I have reviewed this project and it does not need to have wireframes. Waste of everybody's time. It was just something that we did, but it made no difference to the project at all. It was just a thing to do. And it's better to have, and it was good that I could do that as the project manager and the team didn't have to waste their time doing that. But that's an extreme example, and one that was fairly easy to work around. But trying to do comprehensive documentation can really get in the way of done. And that's similar in a lot of ways to me to the fourth one. It's good to have a plan. You want to have a plan for where you're going. You want to understand what the deliverables are, what the milestones are. But things are going to change. Sometimes it's just that other business priorities happen. There are people get sick and have to be out of the office for a while, or the conditions of the think about if we would have all kept the same plans before COVID and during COVID, if we wouldn't have changed our plans for how we worked, what we were trying to accomplish, how we were, that would have been, I think everybody realized that would have been silly. There was a huge change to everything in our environment. We had to respond to that. That's a big example, an extreme example, but it works in small ways too. When you focus more on the plan and you're really just reporting deviance to the plan rather than actually responding to the change and doing what you need to do to produce a working end system, then it's not as helpful. And then customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Sometimes you're working with a vendor or you are serving as the vendor, and you do need an SOW that says we will do this, we won't do this. You have some scope, and that's a good thing. But particularly with internal people, there were days, when I started in IT. So we're back in the late 80s, early 90s, and it was pretty common for us to write some kind of requirements specification, and we would actually, we would talk to the end users, but then we software engineers would go and wherever our desks were, usually crammed in the basement in a corner in the dark next to the furnace or something, and we built this thing, but we didn't talk to anybody. We just built it. And then we said, oh, here are the requirements that we wrote down. This seems to work. It seems to match the requirements. I'm done. And we were much more invested and even rewarded for fulfilling that contract with the end user. And sometimes that's not at all what they needed. And I'm sure you've bumped into these kinds of things yourself, where you build an elegant solution to the wrong problem, because the problem comes out more as you talk to the people who are using the system, as you're working with what they're understanding what their needs are, because they're actually seeing whether it's software on a screen, whether it's a physical product that you're building, whether it's you know, an overview of what an event's going to look like. The more you can interact with the people who are actually going to use that solution, the better off you are, and that's a lot more important than the contract. And let's go ahead and move to the next poll, and it's really going to be of these four. If you were picking one to focus on, if you were picking one that really resonates with you, and you said, this is the one that I like the best, which one of these? What's your favorite value? I'm going to pick one too. My favorite one is winning right at the moment. Yeah, I think that's I think that the I like the way that's trending, and I do think that we can get really focused on processes and tools, and I went into that quite a bit, and really you just need to have conversations with people. That's where you have to start. You have to make sure that you have the right people involved, that the right people are talking to each other, and that's something we can facilitate as project managers, as Scrum Masters, as product owners, whatever our role is, software engineering managers, or whatever our role is. We can help guide those interactions. I think that's something that we can really help facilitate. And then the other one is, yeah, responding to changeover, following a plan. I think that I'm seeing, at least where I work now, I'm seeing less of a focus on having a long-term, you know, doing the big planning up front, but it still happens, and it still is something that we have to watch and not fall into, but be ready to say, well, oh, we need to change, and that's okay. And then you still can have a plan. You know, I do not like we don't need a plan, we don't need any estimates, we're just gonna do stuff. I think that's it doesn't help have any kind of conversation with stakeholders and executives. So you still have to have a plan, you still have to have some milestones, you still have to have some target dates. But you can, and as you actually talk to people, you can use what you know about the plan, where it's gone wrong, and how we've responded to what, you know, what assumptions weren't viable, whatever. So I like that we're on those, focusing on those two. I think those are probably in real life the two that they resonate with us, because we see how important they are. Those of you who are doing it, keep doing it. Those of you who aren't, let's see what we can do to find ways to make those happen. All right, I'm jumping into principles. So there are 12 principles. I put them on 3 slides here, and I just copied them straight off the Manifesto's website. And again, these are software focused, but really anything that we are building, anything that we're developing, any solution that we're presenting can fit into here. And so the first one, you know, early and continuous delivery of valuable software. I think that that's something that we have as a discipline, and I think we've worked well with a lot of our business partners to have a much better sense of, let's do small pieces of work, and let's evaluate a small piece and make sure that it's doing what we want it to do before we do more. One of the things that used to happen in the olden days was, and those of us who are in IT, we trained business people in really bad ways, because we said, give us all the requirements, and we're going to go build this. Oh, and anything that doesn't get done in this project, we're going to close this project, and then we'll get back to you in a year. And so we trained them to stuff everything possible into a project, and then they would push hard to not close a project because there were still things that they wanted. And so instead of doing this early and continuous delivery, delivering a solution that fits some needs, that's great. But then instead of doing that, we would try to deliver one big thing. And a lot of times, by the time something's, especially if it's something that goes months or a year or more, sometimes everything has changed. The conditions on the ground are different than when you started. So doing that early and continuous delivery makes a lot of sense, and you get feedback, and you can change, and again, you can respond to change rather than following a plan, because you're interacting and presenting things more often. Changing requirements. I worked with when I was at Albertsons. We worked with a vendor company of contract software engineers, and they would always talk about freezing requirements. Well, we have to freeze these now. We can, and that always bothered me, because the environment changes, the conditions change, and we need to be ready to respond to those. Sometimes the business changes. Sometimes, the profits of a for-profit company are lower than expected, and we need to change what we're focused on. We need to drop some things. We need to reprioritize others, and so if requirements change for a particular system, if priorities change, we need to do what we can to embrace those, because that's how we all, working together inside an organization, succeed. The third one there. Did we have some? Okay, all right. Delivering working software frequently. That it's very similar to the early and continuous delivery. Let's put something in front of people as quickly as we can, so that they can find if there's anything that needs to be adjusted, they have a chance to adjust it, and we can be constantly looking at what we've produced, comparing that to what the users need, and moving forward that way.
Yeah, Greg, I saw that Remy had made a comment about there's a commitment tied to the Agile principles is to deliver the highest value to the customer. I try to make that a focus of every project. Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll see things like way to shortest job first, or other kind of prioritization, where you say, let's take the thing that has the most value that we can deliver the quickest, and that's what we're going to focus on first. And there are a lot of similar models, but yeah, what is that value? And then when I check with the people who are using that system, did I do what did I do what they needed? And sometimes it's, when they see the solution, they say, oh, that's not really what I need. I thought that was what I needed, but it's not. And now you can build toward that value. And when you have that shared value, you're working in the right way. So yeah, thank you. Thank you, Remy. I think one of the most difficult things for all of us is having people across departments. Whether it's IT and other departments in the company, or whether it's HR or marketing, or it doesn't matter. It's really easy for us to get, because we usually sit together in departments, or we all work from home, and so we're not around anybody, and so we have to really pay attention to how we interact with all of the people who are involved and affected and impacted by the work that we're doing, so that we understand each other, we understand each other's needs, we understand what other work is going on inside the organization. And when you're not working together, the Scrum suggestion is that you actually have everybody on the team in the same area working together, face to face, person to person. That's not always a feasible solution, but that concept, and there are lots of different ways that can be implemented, but that concept of constantly talking to the people who are developing the solution and the people who are going to use the solution, that has to happen, and I think daily is a pretty good cadence. All right. The building projects around motivated individuals, and then give them the environment and support they need. A lot of that is about, again, about focusing on individuals and interactions. If we have the right people and we can trust them to do what they, basically what we hired them to do, let's make sure they understand where they're going, make sure that we have ways to check on what's being done, and is it adding the value that we expect, but let those individuals, in as many ways as they can, do that work. And I'm going to jump ahead because we talk about the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. That's a very similar thing. We hire good people. We hire people who have expertise, and then we bring them together and we let them figure out what the right way to put things together are. I'm sure anybody who's in IT has at some point, a business user goes to a conference, sees a piece of software, says, oh, this is wonderful, this will solve all of my problems, buys the software, and then comes to IT and say, hey, can you set this up for me? And it makes for some difficult conversations, because we don't have a shared, what's the need, what is the value we're trying to produce, how does that integrate with other solutions that we have? But when people are all talking together, it's easier to get that done. This one is probably the most outdated. The most efficient and effective way is to use face-to-face conversation. Well, it might be true, but in the last 20 years, we have figured out, especially the last 3 years, we have figured out how to work not in the same building, not in the same room, and we still find, and I think most people will, when you're on a call, whether it's Zoom or Teams or whatever, and everybody has their cameras on, and you can see people's faces, you can see who's engaged, you can see who's disengaged, you can read maybe not all of the body language, but a lot of it. You can hear the tone in people's voices, you can see when they look confused, you can see when they agree. That is still much more, that's better than the old conference calls or something, where, especially if you had a conference room in Boise and a conference room in Chicago and a conference room in Orlando, and it was just 3 big rooms of people, and you maybe didn't even know who was talking because it was just individual conversation. And then somebody in your room would put the phone on mute so that they could have a side conversation with just the people in the room. We know face-to-face works really well, and I think there are ways to use the communication tools that we have today to replicate that without making everybody drive to the same building and live in the same town and so on. Something that's a working system is the primary measure of progress. I remember some of you who've been around here know Larry Leach, and his he taught a lot of critical chain theory, and he's the one who taught me that if you haven't delivered something, there is zero value. So the idea of percent complete it's not helpful, because if it's not in the hands of the people who can use it, it has zero value, and therefore, for all practical purposes, it's 0% complete. And I latched onto that, and I may be misquoting Larry a bit, and if I am, sorry, but the idea of it's either done or it isn't. And so measuring progress by what have you actually delivered, what is actually in the hands of the people who need it, I think that is absolutely the right measure, because 80% complete doesn't really tell me anything, because what I really want to know is what can I use? Does it add value? Are there changes we can make to add even more value? Are there? That's what we want to get to. And then I think this is something that we have are doing better with. I think there used to be a lot more of the software death marches. Well, software or anything else, we have to have this done by this date. It absolutely has to go out, and it can't be broken, and and then people are expected to work 60, 70, 80-hour weeks, and that is not sustainable. I think it's fine to ask people to do that for short bursts, for really important enterprise critical pieces of work, but it's even better if you can be at a pace where you can work hard, work well, work effectively, and sustain that pace indefinitely is a good term. So having that, just being able to understand what the speed, the velocity of the team is, so that you take on the right amount of work, you prioritize the work appropriately, you know when you need to add team members, or maybe when you have too many team members, and you can keep a sustainable pace that that helps people be productive and not burned out and not stressed and happier, because they're being productive and adding value, and those go together. This is something that the continuous attention to technical excellence and good design, the having strong technical skills and having a real focus on quality is something that I have always put a lot of effort into, and a lot of thought into. How do we make sure that we are building this as solidly as we can? It still needs to be effective. It still needs to be efficient. You can't slow everything down to achieve perfection at every step, but you can build in technical excellence, and you do that through a number of ways. Through building technical skills, through building communication skills, through there are a lot of certifications and courses and with things like LinkedIn Learning and other short courses that we can take advantage of. There are a lot of ways to build technical excellence into our teams, whether that's actual technology or whether that's just building strong teamwork, so that the team is building across their skill set that excellence. I think that's important, and it does enhance what you can do together. I think the next one, the simplicity, this may be the one that is most controversial. I think a lot of these, there just isn't, you read them and you say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. But the art of maximizing the amount of work not done, I think that's a tough concept for a lot of us. When I did the PMP exam, this was the concept of gold plating. That was where we were thinking is you don't just build what is needed, but you go over and above, and you do more work to make it even better. And while that sounds really good, it's not always the right approach in the the PMBOK guide. So I did my PMP in 2005, and we were thinking about a lot about cost, and if I add more work, and it may be a better product, but now I've spent more money that I'm not necessarily getting paid for or getting value from. And that was kind of how we think about it. But now I think a lot of it is about, how do I deliver something quickly? What can I not do so I can get this in front of the users more quickly and get their feedback more quickly? And then we can add on to that. There's nothing wrong with adding on. We just want to simplify and make the essential piece of value first, and then increase the value as we go. I think that's a hard concept for a lot of us to it is a different mindset of, let's do the smallest amount of work and deliver that, instead of let's make this much closer to perfection. All right, we talked some about self-organizing teams. And I think that, and that's not a who do I report to, how much money do I get paid, when can I take time off? It's not necessarily those kinds of things. Those are still, they're places where enterprise standards make a lot of sense. But for how we build things, when the teams come together and say, based on the infrastructure that we have, and what we already have, what tools we already have in place, and understanding what the needs of the company are, we can design something that will work really well. And that's always much better to come from the people who are doing work than from a CIO, a chief marketing officer, a CEO. They may have great, they have the vision of the target of where to go, but the best actual design of the work comes from the people who are doing the work. And when they have the power to organize and to understand what the tasks are, and to talk about the order and how the collaboration should work, that really does help. And I've seen that where, especially in places that have been used to a more, the Agilistas like to say, command and control organizations, where people are used to being told what to do, and they are maybe have been taught to fear thinking for themselves. They wait, even though they may know. And we've hired smart people. We've hired people who have this experience. We've sent them to training to increase their technical and other skills. And so now we need to let them, and we need to empower them. We need to tell them, yeah, go and we trust you. Go and do this. And if it doesn't turn out right, then we'll adjust. And that's the final principle here. At regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, and then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. One thing in a more, when I worked in more waterfall methods, almost always at the end of a project, as part of the closing process, you do a lessons learned of some sort. But it's really difficult to take any action. You do a post-mortem. Basically, we've put this out. Now, what did we do well and what didn't we do well? But then what do you do with that information? So if you can do this at regular intervals, and I know I started doing this as I was helping teams break down work into smaller milestones, smaller deliverables, even within something that looked more like a waterfall methodology, not an agile, certainly not a Scrum or a Kanban way of doing things, not even a lean way of thinking, but just let's do small. Let's break this project up into small projects or small phases, or whatever word works with our executives and stakeholders. And then as we're going through that, let's do at least at that milestone. So every couple of months, we're doing a reflection. We're doing a small lessons learned that we can use then as we're planning the next one. And I think that's one of the big things that Scrum, I think that's one of the best things about the Scrum processes is the retrospective, and at the end of each sprint, you do a retrospective and you say, what went well, what didn't go well, what should we do more of, what should we do less of, how should we change? And I don't, you don't necessarily have to follow Scrum to do that, but you do need to, at regular intervals, go in and look at what's working and what isn't, and that includes how are we working together. Do we need to change how our team agreements? Do we need to change, or do we just need to change the how we're implementing things, or what do we need to do? What would make us more effective? And that's just an important and crucial thing, is that constant reflection. The kind of the buzzword is inspect and adapt. Let's look at what we did and let's adapt and make changes based on what's happened. So, and you can see how from these values and principles, you can see how things like Scrum especially evolved, but you can also see how some of the DevOps and extreme programming and some of the engineering skills came out, and you can see how a model like SAFe or Scrum at Scale or any of the larger, they're trying to implement these values and principles in a way that makes sense for an entire organization, and so there are good things and bad things about that, but you can also, I guarantee you can be agile, small a agile, without being big A agile. Here at PetIQ, they were doing Scrum when I came. I've been here for close to 3 years now. There was one team that was doing Scrum, and it was similar to what I described earlier, that they were doing a lot of the ceremonies, but they weren't really acting in an agile way, and in some ways they were being discouraged from acting according to agile principles and values by some of the executives. It was not a good winning situation, and so we stopped doing Scrum. But we have myself and my team of we call ourselves implementation managers, which sounds really cool, but it's kind of like being a project manager, Scrum master. It's that kind of a role, helping to implement solutions. And we focus on, without using the word agile, without using the word manifesto, without talking about Scrum or Kanban seems to be less scary to people. Oh, it's just a board that you move things to what phase they're in. Sometimes you can use that word, but we kind of try to stay away from the agile industrial complex words. But we do want to know. So these are just some ideas that I think are useful to incorporate in whatever way makes sense with you and your teams and your stakeholders. So know those agile values and principles. You don't have to memorize them. You don't have to be able to recite them. But things like we are going to pay more attention to individuals and interactions rather than processes and tools. We are going to focus on responding to change, or following a plan. We do want to have sustainable development cadence for whatever it is that we're developing or building. You want to know those things because you can then help as you're training, educating, advising, coaching, whatever role you're in. If you know the values and principles, you can use those to help explain why this is more effective, which rolls right into number 2. Why should we work differently? Being ready to give that answer, and the answer of well, this is what the Scrum guide says, is not it's not valid for most people. So, but if you can say, we want to make sure that the people who are building the solution are talking to the people who are going to use the solution on a regular basis, preferably daily. And whether we do that through a daily meeting, whether it's a stand-up or whether it's just I'm going to make sure I come down to your desk and talk to you every day, or you come down to my desk, or whatever. If you and the reason why is because developing those communication pathways is really going to help everybody understand the value of what's being created. So being able to understand and give that why, and in the context of what works best in your organization, this is why we need to work differently. And I think being ready for that will help you be more agile without being agile. Always be showing. I stole that from Glengarry Glen Ross, but be demonstrating, be showing what you're creating. Have regular, whether it's a demo, whether it's a test site, there are lots of different ways to do that. And whether it's for a big audience, or whether it's just going to somebody's desk and saying, hey, look, take a look at this. Here's what I've done. Does this make sense to you? Does this fulfill the need that you have? That always be showing what's going on and getting feedback is a really great way to be agile and to use those values and principles in a really practical way that doesn't need any kind of structure around it. You can put structure around it. You can do, you know, Scrum tends to have the sprint demos, as does SAFe and other of the larger things. But just maybe I'm just going to show this to a couple of people. I just want, or maybe I just have a design that I want to show them, or maybe I just want to send them some screenshots and get their feedback. But whatever it is, always be showing what's being created and get that input throughout the process, which ties into delivering small things early rather than big things late. If you can deliver a small thing that has some value is better than zero value. And so being able to put out something small in front of users is better than delaying and delaying and delaying till you get the whole big thing. There are some things that are tougher to do in small chunks, but most work can be broken down. There are some pieces that can be delivered, that can be shown, that can be adding value, even if the whole system takes longer to implement. Hold regular what's working and what isn't team meetings. You don't have to call them retrospectives. You don't have to call them lessons learned. And it can just be, as part of your regular team meeting. It may just be something that you put on the agenda and, what's going well? What isn't going well? What should we do more of? What should we do less of? It can be really informal, or there are lots of, there are websites where if you look at Scrum retrospectives, if you search for that, there are all kinds of if you want to gamify it, if that makes sense for your teams, and it may not, but there are ways to ask those same questions and to do it in more fun ways. And there are some teams who are opposed to fun, and they'd rather do, we're just going to make a list of this works, we're not going to do it. Then we're going to do the stuff that works, we're not going to do the stuff that doesn't. However that works with your team, having that regular cadence of what's working and what isn't is essential. Don't fear change, and I think having the team pick one of those values to focus on is a really good way to do things. Let's put up that last poll, because we're about out of time. Still have some water to drink, so. All right, yeah, what are these practices are you likely to try with your team first? So there's something here that makes sense. maybe it's just, identifying something that helps, whatever it is. How can you take this back to your team? What kind of practice here makes sense to take back to your team and start working on, whether it's this afternoon, whether it's this week, whether it's next week, but how can we find ways to improve the way we're working to make it more effective? And I think one of the Agile principles is, in that same way that you deliver small solutions often, you make small changes often, rather than upsetting the apple cart. So and I think that, seeing this spread across all of the potential, the ideas that I threw out there is, it's good to see, because I think that different teams have different needs. People are in different places. Organizations are in different places. And so, seeing that first one be the highest percentage right now of delivering value in smaller pieces, I think that, and I actually think that it can help with team morale, because you're actually putting something out that people are using. I think it helps with stakeholders and executives, because they see that progress in a much more physical way. And so I think that makes a lot of sense. And I just got, this is my for fun slide, and I know some people are going to have 1 o'clock meetings that you need to drop off and go to, and I understand that. But I'm working. I'm learning a new language. I'm using Duolingo, and I'm thoroughly enjoying that. But one of the suggestions Duolingo gave, and they use a lot of Agile principles, whether they know it or not, of learning, small pieces of a language, and getting those solidified early, rather than here's all the grammar that you could ever want, that's harder to use. So how do I actually get value out of this? One of the suggestions they had is set up your computer or your phone to default to the language that you're learning, so that you can have you can see those words and you can see the context, and that will help you pick up the language. Most, a lot of, especially, like an iPhone, everything has Spanish, everything has French, everything has Mandarin, everything has Japanese. I picked a language that is much more, much less common. And so when I actually went to the Agile Manifesto page and I actually saw this in the language that I was learning, I was pretty shocked and pretty impressed that it actually showed up. But here is this is the front page of the manifesto. These are the main values in Scottish Gaelic. So if you ever want, if you're a full Gaelic speaker, you understand that already. If you're learning Gaelic like me, you recognize some words. The rest of you say, well, why are all those letters? Why are there so many consonants? Where are all the vowels? Or why, when there are vowels, are they all together at the same time? But I thought that was pretty interesting. All right, any final comments, Brian?
That is interesting. Well, Greg, we do appreciate you taking the time with us and sharing your knowledge with us. Hey, if those on the call, if you could do me a favor, George is going to publish another poll here. We're looking at extending out lunch and learns over the summer, and wanted to get the feedback from here. So I see the polls up. If you could just take a quick moment and respond to what your thoughts are about PM Lunch and Learn during the months of July and August. We'll take that feedback back to the leadership at the chapter and see where we want to go with it. Looks like we're getting some votes in. Thank you. And again, a reminder, next month we're going to learn about building a business case. So that'll be our subject next month. And then following, as I said earlier, following this, we'll be sending out PDU reporting instructions. Greg, thanks again, and we will chat with you later and look forward to meeting with you again.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for inviting me, and this was really, really enjoyable to do. Good to see all of you. Thank you.
Take care. All right.